On this video, I want to continue what I had started in a previous video. We might call this one part 2. In a previous video, I was giving rules for parsing the verb, and especially the imperfect. And this can be found, by the way, on a brief grammatical summary that I have given that I shared a number of years ago with students, my students, on the title would be The Person and Work of Christ, Jesus, seen through Hebrew and Aramaic grammar in the Torah, the prophets, and the writings of the Hebrew scriptures. And basically, it is on pages 16, 17, and following. And in the last video, I looked at the imperfect rule chart for parsing imperfect verbs in Hebrew. One must know the cow regular verb suffix and imperfect prefixes in the different stems. Actually, the suffixes and the prefixes will be the same in all the stems. Like, for example, shamar, shamra, shamarta, shamart, shamarti. Shamru, shamartim, shamartin, shamarnu. And there we have the suffixes. Ta, te, ti, and then u, tim, tin, and nu. But then, as we go to the imperfect, we have prefixes. Yishmor, tishmor, tishmor, tishmori, eshmor. Yishmaru, tishmorna, tishmaru, tishmorna, nishmor. And here you have your prefixes of aleph for first person. For second person, we have the tav, as well as for third person, and the noon for first common plural. So yod for third, tav for third feminine, third masculine, I should say yod. Tav for third feminine or second masculine, prefix aleph for first person, and noon for the plural, first person. And so you need to know those and then apply the rules. But when I do the rules, I'm looking at the third masculine singular prefix. So in the previous video, we said if you are looking at an imperfect, if it's an A class vowel, go to the next full vowel. If it's an I, it's a hifil. Anything else is cow. An example we gave was yagdil, an A-I vowel pattern. Pathak, hirikyot. That would be a hifil imperfect causative. Number 2, if it's an I class vowel, go to the first radical or consonant of the root. If it's an A, it's got to be a nif vowel. Anything else is cow. For example, yishamer is a nif vowel imperfect, he will be kept. Notice, as we saw in the previous video, the noon of that stem, the nif vowel stem, has assimilated into the sheen by progressive assimilation. And so that's an indicative of the nif vowel imperfect, I long A. Then, number 3, if you have a shava followed by a pathak and the doubling of the middle consonant, the middle radical, that is a PL stem. And so yedaber is the example we used. He will speak. Under the prefix, if you have a shava followed by a kibbutz, yedubar, you're looking at a pu'al imperfect. Again, you double the middle radical in both the PL and the pu'al. The shava pathak or the shava kibbutz vowel pattern gives it away as either a PL or a pu'al. Then you have, if it's an O class vowel under the prefix, either a commons katon or hatuf commons, you have a hofal. Yog dal. He has been magnified. And then a participle, you have a mem prefix in the PL, the puel, hifil, hofal, and hitpael. But you'll have the same vowel pattern that we've just looked at in the PL stem. So, magdil, for example, magna, cause to magnify, is a hifil participle with a mem prefix and an AI vowel pattern, pathak followed by a hirik yod. Let me just make one other statement. Hitpael, in the imperfect, you'll have a yit prefix. Yit, let's say yit from kavad, to glorify or to be great, gadal. Yit gadal. You have a yit prefix. That's pretty much a dead giveaway with that yit. And I'm working at the third person all the way through here, masculine, singular. Now I want to go to the next, what we might call I've outlined it on page actually 18 as the hey prefix. You need to go to that particular chart if you have a hey prefix and let's say 3 radicals or 3 consonants. If it's an a vowel, it will be a hifel imperative or infinitive. Hagdil can be magnify, imperatival or imperative, or le hagdil, to magnify. And yet it's that A-I vowel pattern. Secondly, if it's an I vowel under the hey prefix or radical, then go to the first radical or consonant of the root. If it's an A vowel, it's got to be a nifal, imperative or infinitive, like hi, sha, mer. Be kept. Notice again the noon of the stem has assimilated into the sheen by progressive assimilation. So the noon sheen becomes the she with the doubling of it because of the progressive assimilation of the noon. Otherwise, if you have otherwise, it's got to be a hifel perfect. In other words, if it's an A vowel followed by an I, it's got to be a nifal, imperative, or infinitive. Otherwise, it's a hifel perfect, like higdil from gadal. We're using the gadal to be great. And so that would be magnified. Now, if you have an O vowel or a U vowel under the hey, it will be a hofal, perfect or imperative or infinitive, like hogdal, be magnified. Note we have a comet hatuf here, which is a short vowel, hogdal. So those are the basic rules for the hey, what we might call hey prefix chart. And I would encourage one to memorize those rules, and then you'll be able to identify the form. Fortunately, in biblical Hebrew, we have vowels that help us out to determine what stem we're looking at. Then we have what we might call the in prefix chart. That's where you have the noon before the stem. And I'm showing it with 3 radicals on page 19, or 3 consonants. If you have a pathak, an I, pathak vowel pattern, it's got to be a nifal perfect. Nish mar. Notice the hirik under the noon and the pathak under the mem. Nishmad. If it's an I comma with a long A vowel and not a short, it's a nif vowel participle normally. Nishmad, he was keeping. So the IA vowel pattern, if it does not appear, then go back and apply the imperfect rule chart to determine the imperfect form for the first common plural. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at a nif vowel perfect or a nif vowel participle, depending on whether the A vowel, the final syllable, A vowel, is a pathak or a comet. If it's a comet, it's probably a participle. If the AI vowel pattern does not appear, then apply the imperfect rule chart. For example, it might have a shava pathak, first person plural, and be a PL. So that's where you would apply the imperfect rule chart. Now, the final, can I say, part of this, we might say, survey of grammar and parsing will be to look at a verb if there is no prefix, a no prefix chart. I'm going to talk about examples of vowel patterns. Shamar, you have an AA vowel pattern. That would be like a cow perfect. He has kept. A long A and a short a comma followed by a pathak. If we have shomer, an O, followed by tsere, we're looking at a cow active participial form. Cow active participle. He is keeping. If we, and I'm staying with the verb shamar here for a bit, if we have shamur, a long A followed by a shuri, we're looking at a cow passive participle, he was kept. Then, if we have an imperative, shemor, a shava followed by an O vowel, we're looking at a cow imperative, keep. If we add a lamed to that, lishmor, we have a shava under the lamed followed by the O vowel at the end of in the final syllable. We're looking at a cow infinitive construct, to keep. And then if we have shamur, an A, long A vowel, followed by a long O vowel, a holim vav, we have an infinitive absolute, cow, infinitive absolute, indeed keep, or keep indeed. Or it could mean keep continually, depending on whether the infinitive absolute precedes or follows the verb. If it follows the verb, it would be keep indeed. If it comes before, keep continually. Or it could be the other way around, excuse me, depending on where shamur appears. Shamur yishmor, or shamur yishmor shamor. Yishmor shamor would be keep continually, whereas shamor yishmor would be indeed keep. In my thinking about the review of that, but at any rate, the AO vowel pattern, you're looking at an infinitive absolute. Then you have your PL stem and the vowel pattern. Let's look at the verb davar, to speak. Here you have a PL perfect in the hirik under the dalid using davar. And then you have the tsere, diber, or shiber, or kitev, depending on what root you're using. But it's an I short hirik, followed by the doubling of the middle radical, and a tseri normally. So he spoke. If it's puel, let's say you have a pathak under the dalit, followed by a tseri, it would be an imperative like speak. Uh, if you're asking someone to speak the word, it would be a patha followed by the doubling of the middle radical and a tseri. And then the infinitive, PL infinitive to speak, would be led daber, a shava followed by a pathak, an a vowel, and a tseri, again, doubling of the middle radical. That would be to speak. And finally, the vowel pattern for the pual, if it doesn't have a prefix or a suffix, we'll use the word pu God or du bar. But let me use the word pagad to visit. Pay, kof, dalit. You have a UA vowel pattern. You're looking at a pual perfect. He was visited. Or it could also be an imperative or an infinitive, depending on its use, contextual use. So those are just a summary of a vowel pattern that helps in parsing. And I wanted to share that. We might call it the overall chart identification for parsing verbs in uh, the different stems. And so I'm just going to stop here, but I hope this will be a help for people that are reading the Hebrew Bible but are trying to figure out, what stem is that and how do I go about determining it without memorizing every stem and paradigm. I think vowel patterns are a tremendous help. Then I want to do a video sometime later on the weak verbs and how to identify weak verbs. So we have looked at the strong verbs, and then we'll do the weak verbs. And we'll talk about what a weak verb is and so forth.